Right, hi and welcome to my screencast on 19.2 risk assessment. First one I've chosen to do is bouldering. Bouldering is a sport that is similar to rock climbing, except you do not have any ropes attached, so it's completely free climbing. And it's also not the same height as bouldering, because it's mostly done at lower heights, so if you were to fall without the ropes, then you wouldn't get as badly injured. Here's the risk assessment. A couple of them are that the grips could potentially fall out of the wall because of the screws potentially being loose. So obviously the participants and the people who are standing below are at risk here. To ensure this is not going to happen, the grips will be tightly screwed in so they won't fall out, and there'll be crash mats below so they're not going to land and maybe bounce off a hard surface. They'll just be cushioned by a soft surface. And then to ensure this actually happens and this is secure before the centre even opens, all of the grips will be checked and tested, and the location of the crash mats will also be made sure of to ensure that they're going to be cushioned. Another one is falling off from the top from losing balance. So on some of the walls, you can get onto the top, but then once you stand up there, maybe if you suffer from fear of heights, you might suddenly feel a bit unbalanced and you could potentially fall off. So the people at below are also at risk from this. But the participants will be told that if they get to the top, they must then go over the other side and back down as soon as possible to avoid this happening. And then prior to the activities, participants will be told that no more than 2 people can actually go up there. And they'll be constantly having instructors watching them to make sure that those rules are not broken. So for the equipment that you need for bouldering, you're going to need, well, you don't need, but it does help a lot to have some of these shoes there. You can see they're specifically designed for one purpose, and that is bouldering. So you just have better grip on the walls with them. Chalk is very important because it keeps your hands not very sweaty and soaks up the moisture and makes your hands really dry so you can hold onto the wall really well. And reduces your risk of falling off quite significantly. And then also you can see in this picture the guy's wearing quite tight fitting clothes, not really tight, but tight enough that they're not going to get caught on anything. And he's also comfortable in no matter what position he's in on the wall. The emergency procedures, if anything was to go wrong, is that an ambulance would be called eventually if it was a really serious injury and there was nothing that the people who were already there could do. And then there's also going to be a first aid kit on site, so if there are any cuts or things that need bandaging as soon as possible, then all of that stuff will be available nearby. For the environmental considerations, you've got to take into account when bouldering that if you're going outdoors, then it may be frowned upon and even illegal to climb in certain places. It can also be looked at as ethically wrong because the rocks are obviously natural things, and therefore climbing and changing the appearance of them potentially is frowned upon by certain groups of people. So in conclusion, most of the risks that were mentioned were accounted for at the place we did it at, called Boulder Brighton, the indoor centre. I'm unsure of some of them as we did not actually witness them checking the tightness of the boulders at the start of the day, for example, as we were not in the first session, we were at midday. As far as environmental considerations go, indoor centres such as Boulder Brighton are being set up in order to stop people doing it on real life rocks, causing damage to them. So a lot of those ethical groups who are quite frustrated with people doing it outside benefiting from a lot of these indoor centres. So the next sport is windsurfing. You can see here it's a sport, I was sailing on a board with a sail attached to it. For the risk assessment, I'm going to zoom in here. One of them is hitting your head on the sail mast, so obviously got to be quite solid in order to hold the sail up. So if you do hit your head in it, then it could maybe cause you to be knocked unconscious. All the masts are going to be fitted with foam around them in order to not cause really bad damage. Instead of hitting your head on metal, you're going to be hitting your head on a more spongy material. The actions necessary for this will be that the masts will be checked before every session to ensure that there are no areas that are exposed. So maybe the water's kind of worn away a spongy area that could reveal a more damaging metal part of the mask, but hopefully they'll be checked before every session. Another one is that if the board maybe were to break in the rare occasion, you could fall in the water, and maybe if you can't swim or you're knocked unconscious when falling in, then this could be a risk. It will be made compulsory that they're told where to stand before they even get in the water. This is just to ensure that no unnecessary pressure is being put on the boards at any time that could maybe cause them to break. The equipment that you're going to need for windsurfing is just a surfboard that will have a sail attached to it. That's quite straightforward. That's all you need. And maybe if the weather's cold, then you could need an ambulance, but it's not need a wetsuit. But that's obviously not an essential part of it. Is the water temperature always changes in different locations. For the emergency procedures, also, if something were to go really wrong, such as a broken leg, but you're able to get in, then get in from the sea or wherever you're doing it in a lagoon. You could call an ambulance, and if you were doing it at sea and you were unable to get in, then there would most of the time be a lifeguard there. If it was done in open water conditions, so they'd be able to swim out and help you. The environmental conditions of windsurfing, there aren't actually that many that can be affected from windsurfing, but the only thing that has been complained about is the potential damage to the coral reef when the surf's full off. And in a lot of places such as Australia, for example, you've got like the Great Barrier Reef, and a lot of people are always surfing around that area because it gives you the best waves for surfing. But when it comes to falling off, a lot of like equipment or the riders themselves could fall onto the coral, and it damages the coral and really can ruin the aesthetics of it. So a lot of people are very unhappy about that. Next sport is skiing. A sport that involves having a pair of skis attached to your feet and skiing down a hill on snow. It can also be done on flat snow, but the certain type of skiing that I'm going to be talking about is just straight downhill skiing. So the risk assessment, you can see one of them is skiing into a tree, and this could obviously knock you unconscious, cause multiple injuries, also like leg breaks or any bone breaks really. The controls to be in place is that the tree will be wrapped with crash mat material to ensure that if contact is made, then it's against a soft surface. So this is from experience really that this has been put in place, because it used to happen so much where skiers would ski into poles or trees that it wasn't in their control, and so now a lot of them are wrapped with this bright coloured crash mat material. So if they were to hit a tree, then it's going to be really, really cushioned. It's still going to could still cause injuries, but it's going to reduce the risk of serious injury a lot. The actions necessary for this is that the trees on the runs will be checked that they have been wrapped properly every day. So on every ski run, the trees, they're going to be checked every time for the runs that are available to normal people. The ones off piste, not as much, because you're not actually meant to ski off piste anyway. But yeah, most of the trees will be wrapped with this stuff. So the equipment needed for skiing, you're going to need a pair of skis, some poles and the boots, and maybe even some goggles, but that's not completely essential stuff. And the environmental conditions is that when skiing off piste, it can ruin the wildlife, because there's more wildlife growing from the ground that is then being killed by the skis when they cut through it. Certain ethical groups would find this wrong. Some people are also complaining about the aesthetics of the mountains being changed, because when the skiers go down it, they leave trails which stop the snow appearing as smooth, so it makes a real different look to the snow, makes it look a lot more thin and icy. And also, just for the emergency procedures, most of the time if you're skiing on a mountain, it's going to require an airlift if it's anything lower body or spinal, anything like paralysis related, that's going to force you to not be able to move, and you can't then ski down the mountain and get help. You're going to be airlifted by a helicopter that then will take you to the nearest hospital. The final sport is mountain biking. This is where you have an off-road bike and you're cycling downhill over different terrains. So the risk assessment, just a random one, is cycling into other cyclists. So participants and other cyclists are at risk here. And the controls to be in place to stop this happening is it will be made the rules for all the legal places that are designed for mountain biking that only one cyclist can go down a run at one time. So this is just to ensure that the runs are never crowded and they have the whole width of the terrain to use. It's probably not very likely, but if it were to happen, then the speed that some of the mountain bikers go at, it could cause serious injury for the risk rating. So instructors will always be close by, ensuring that this rule stays in place. So the whole way down there's going to be people in bright jackets, so you know who they are, making sure that there's always just one cyclist in their own space at that point in time. You do need quite a lot of equipment for it in order to ensure your safety is as much as it can be. You also need a mountain bike for it, a helmet, knee pads and arm pads is all essential stuff to avoid things such as broken wrists, broken legs, or bad cuts, or obviously concussion or any head injury with a helmet on. And the emergency procedures is going to be that most of the time, if you're actually doing it in mountains, then it's going to be the same as skiing, where you're going to need to be airlifted off if there's anything that's going to stop you being able to make your own way to the nearest medical location. But if you're doing it at a centre or more lower down where there's obviously road access and hospitals nearby, then you can just be ambulanced or stretchered somewhere nearby. The environmental considerations of mountain biking does bring a lot of environmental issues. One of them being that most of the time the places where it's done is in forests, and they make trails with the bikes that change the aesthetics of it all, which some people are very against because it doesn't have that natural wildlife look to it. It also can cause a lot of noise because of the sound of the larger tyres on the uneven surface, which can cause complaints from people who live nearby. And it can also kill a lot of the wildlife, like skiing, because when the bikes ride over the plants and other foliage, it can destroy the roots, and the tyres also dig very deep into the ground, so it can just tear plants completely out of the ground sometimes, which is obviously not good for the look of the forest and also not good for the wildlife itself. Alright, thank you for watching.